Namo Fudo Boza. Namo Fudo Boza. Namo Fudo Boza. So welcome, everyone, to this evening's celebration of the Liturgy of the Day. My name is Osho Brad, and let us start by sharing the peace. May all beings awaken to that peace which is our true home. Let us take refuge. I take refuge in the ground of being, within which I live and move and breathe. Let us make the accord. I take sanctuary in the heart of being, accepting all of my delusions in thought, word, or deed, born of ignorance, hatred, and greed. Let us give thanks. I give thanks for all beings, awakening to the interbeing of all nature. May my heart be open and my mind clear. May all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and may all come to know that peace which is beyond all understanding. Since it is the practice of enlightenment, that practice has no beginning. And since it is enlightenment within the practice, that realization has no end. So I wanted to spend some time this evening talking about something that we don't often discuss in Buddhism, and that's prayer. So is there prayer in Buddhism? Sort of. So some schools of Buddhism, like Tibetan Buddhism, you'll hear of prayer flags, like the ones you see behind me there, or prayer wheels, and they'll use them to assist in liturgical observances or in chanting. Um, but those activities are a little different from what we normally mean in the West when we talk about prayer. There's a classic image of someone with their head bowed and their hands, folded, maybe. Maybe their hands held open in prayer, maybe kneeling down in prayer, maybe facing a holy site as they pray. And in that image of prayer, what we're often thinking about is, asking some being outside of ourselves to impact our lives, or the lives of people we care about. So, praying for safe travel, praying for healing of an illness, to get a job or to pass a test or to say thank you when those things happen as a result of a prayer. Um, and prayer in that traditional sense, that traditional Western sense, is often directed at some entity that we believe can make a difference, right? An omnipotent God or one of a pantheon of gods, um, or spirits inhabiting certain objects or locations, or some spiritual figure or presence that can intercede on our behalf. And then, as a result of those prayers, we gauge the effectiveness by whether or not they were answered sometimes, right? We want what we're praying for to happen. Growing up in the church, I was taught that all prayers are answered, but sometimes that answer is no, right? So sometimes we don't get the job, or we don't pass the test, or the person that we wanted to get better doesn't get better, right? And I would say that idea of prayer, that traditional understanding of prayer, where we're asking for something out there to act in our lives, is a bit less common in Buddhism. I'm sure you'll find it in some schools or in some areas of the world where Buddhism is practiced, but it's less common. Um, and this is largely because Buddhism is considered to be non-theistic. So where prayer is often asking a being, oftentimes a god, for some assistance of some kind, Buddhism is non-theistic, and that basically is to say that the existence of gods aren't a requirement for the Buddha's teachings to be true. Now, there are gods in Buddhism, um, but they're sort of like the furniture of Buddhism as opposed to the feature, right? For example, there are stories where the Buddha, preaches a sermon to the gods in heavenly realms to help them understand the Dharma, right? It's a bit different of an image than we see in a lot of monotheistic religions. You don't often see a human teacher kind of telling a god what's what, right? Um, but in Buddhism, the gods don't really do anything for humans. And so Buddhism doesn't really teach us to ask for anything from the gods, right? Now, all that being said, for those not familiar with Buddhism, or they've only seen a certain image of Buddhism, or popular images of Buddhism, they may think like, well, there's a lot of different gods, right? Aren't you guys praying to gods all the time? You go into a temple and you see altars and statues and all sorts of different representations, and Buddhists are bowing and offering incense and in other ways venerating these representations. But all of those statues and other representations, they're not representing something out there. They're representing something in here, right? They're representing different aspects of ourselves that it can be useful to reflect on. And I know that Osho Mike, in our in-person meditation, or in-person liturgy in Camp Hill, which is on Monday evenings at 6:30, if you would ever like to join them, he gave a talk on some of these figures, these bodhisattvas, a lot of them. And I'll share a few of them. I'll share the Japanese names because our tradition is rooted in some Japanese schools. But one very common bodhisattva is Kanzeon, or Kanon. Also known, you may know the name Avalokiteshvara, that you might see in the Heart Sutra, or Guanyin, which is the Chinese. Avalokiteshvara is a Sanskrit name for Kanzeon, or Kanon. And this is a bodhisattva often depicted as sort of an androgynous figure, sometimes with many arms. And it's the bodhisattva of compassion. And fun fact, because I love trivia, but fun fact, if the camera company Canon, if you look at their old logo, it's Kanzeon. this bodhisattva with many arms. So fun fact on a Wednesday night. Um, Another popular bodhisattva is Jizo. Oftentimes you'll see sometimes like a short, cute, older looking bald guy with holding a staff with a robe. Um, Maybe sometimes holding a child. That is Jizo. Or Kashitagarbha in Sanskrit. The bodhisattva of change, travel, children, and women. Another one, Fudo Myo. Fudo is often a very fierce looking bodhisattva, also called Akala in Sanskrit. And Fudo is the bodhisattva of protection, carrying a sword to cut through delusion. Or Amida Buddha, or Amitabha in Sanskrit, represents our potential to Buddhahood, or more specifically, our inevitable Buddhahood. But all of these figures that you may see in a Buddhist temple, or you may see in popular images of Buddhism, or even in restaurants, all of these are figures that embody traits that we can see in ourselves. They're not out there. Now, we can connect with some of these beings. Even though they represent us, we can connect with them. We connect with the idea of them. And there's some Buddhist practices that, will visualize these bodhisattvas, especially in some tantric schools. And those visualization exercises can be very useful for exploring our minds and our emotions, or creating in a certain mental states that can be beneficial to our practice. And so, like I said, even though we may not pray to these beings asking for something, I'm not going to pray to Kanzeon or pray to Jizo per se to ask for something to happen. Acknowledging our connection to them is an important part of our practice. And some of the ways that we acknowledge that connection is through different chants and mudras, right? When priests in our order open the space, with lighting of incense, asperging, ringing bells, we're using some chants related to some of these bodhisattvas, Namo Fudo Boza, Kanji Zai Boza, right? And when we offer incense later in this liturgy, we'll chant Namu Amida Butsu, right? Which is a chant related to Amida, which is like I said, our potential to Buddhahood. And chanting in terms of mindful and prayerful activities is actually a very big one, right? Chanting is great because it can bring about a meditative space, because the chanting, the fact that it's coming from our own voice, our own vocal cords, can bring us back into our bodies, right? A lot of times when people meditate, they will count the breaths as a way to be present in their bodies. But I find chanting to be much more effective, and actually pay attention to that as we chant later when we light incense, to see if you notice that by once you chant for a little while, you're like, ooh, I'm really here, right? So chanting, like I said, I mentioned mudras as well. Mudras are symbolic hand gestures that we use to represent different bodhisattvas or different things in our practice. For example, mudra for Fudo, the bodhisattva of protection, is the index finger and pinky raised up like this, right? We've seen this used before in other places, sometimes in rock concerts, right? Maybe a different meaning, but for us, it's the mudra of protection. And actually, Sensei Tony, while I was in seminary, mentioned to us that he'll sort of unconsciously make this mudra if he'll hear sirens or see an ambulance go by. And I've actually started doing that myself, as an expression of hoping for the safety of all those involved, protection, well-being, right? So while Buddhists may not pray in a traditional sense, asking a god for something to happen, I wanted to show that there are things that we do that help us stay connected to our Buddha nature, to our true self, to acknowledge that. And we may even do some of those things like mudras, offering incense, chanting, for the benefit of others, to wish them well, to keep them safe, right? Now, in a metaphysical sense, Does making that mudra, if I'm sitting in traffic and an ambulance goes by and I kind of make this mudra just very subtly, like against my leg as I'm sitting there in my car, does that have a direct impact on the EMTs in that ambulance or to the people who they're going to see? In the same way that, those who pray to an omnipotent God would expect their prayers to be answered? Who knows? Maybe. Do I expect this hand gesture to miraculously heal someone or keep them safe, as if by magic somehow? Not necessarily. At least not in the same way that folks may expect a prayer to miraculously heal someone, say through, a miracle of some kind. However, does taking a moment to make that gesture and extend my thoughts towards people who may be hurting and in need of care, and extend to them a desire for health and well-being and care, does that make a difference in me? And the answer is absolutely it does. Right? It reminds me that there are people out there who need healing. It reminds me of the fragility and impermanence of life. It takes me out of my river of thoughts and into an attitude of presence and compassion. And I strongly believe that by doing that, I'm more likely to make a positive difference in the world, when I live that way. And that's what prayer in Buddhism is really about. It's about that intention, right? It's not about necessarily wishing for miracles in the world, but it's about understanding the change that an attitude of prayer and presence can have, and the change that can take place in us. It's more than just, words and actions. It's how we think. It's how we see the world. It's how we speak to others. And doing that on a daily basis, can help make what we want to happen, right? Where there is attention, there is energy, right? And because of our interbeing, our connectedness with the entire world, if it makes a difference in us, then it can make a difference everywhere. So, to come back around to our original question, is there prayer in Buddhism? And I'll answer the same way, sort of. Maybe not in the way that people often think of prayer. Asking a divine being to make a difference in the world, to intercede on our behalf or perform miracles. However, there are prayerful activities in Buddhism that in the context of our own pain and suffering or in the suffering of others can make a difference. And these small prayers or chants or mudras or gathas, which are small sayings that we have in the back of our Book of Common Meditation. These can take us out of our habitual mental patterns, and give us something to do in situations when we encounter suffering or we know that suffering is going on. And it can create in us an energy or intention to make the world a better place. And that can actually come through in our words and our thoughts and our actions and actually make a difference in the world, right? Because it's moving us. It's not moving a being out there, but it's moving us. It's inspiring us to act in 100 small ways. So, for instance, if 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people took time to pause and make a mudra of protection every time they heard sirens, do I believe that would have an impact on society? Of course. Because we're all going to live differently because of that. And so we may actually enact change in the world. Because any practice that changes our minds can change the world too. So I hope that a short reflection on prayer was very helpful. Um, and a book recommendation, one of the books that I looked at as I was preparing for this week that we had is we used to have um, some book like a book club. um, it's called The Energy of Prayer by Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a great book, and it actually changed my thinking years ago around how to think about prayer and the effectiveness of prayer and the energy and the intention that prayer creates. So I recommend that to you all. So again, I hope that was helpful. The moment we receive true and trusting, solid and clear like a diamond, infinite light and life embrace and protect us, liberating us completely. Let us take the four immeasurable vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Delusions are endless. I vow to end them. The ways of compassion and wisdom are boundless. I vow to embody them. The way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. Let us take the precepts for the community of the vow. I allow my true self to manifest in all aspects of life. I take complete responsibility for my own life and all of my actions. I affirm my personal being and acknowledge it as a path to awakening and freedom. I embrace all aspects of my personal being, including my shadow, so that they may be transformed. I affirm an attitude of openness to my true self, even in the midst of suffering. So now I would like to take some time for us to offer incense and chant. Again, a chant related to Amida Buddha. Namu Amida Butsu is what we'll chant. And as we chant, I would invite you to light incense at your own altar or centering space. And we'll chant a few times. Between each time, I will bang the fish drum here, the Mokugyo. After we finish our chant, I will ring a bell and we'll spend some time in meditation and silent reflection and abiding. And then I will ring the bell again to close. No. Amida. Butsu. Amida. Buddha. Nam To celebrate the connection of our practice to the practice of everyone who's walked this path before, who walks it with us today, and who will ever walk this path of the Dharma. Let us recite the Bodhisattva's Gatha. We dedicate this practice to the welfare of all beings throughout space and time. May it always be so. So I hope that you found this celebration of the liturgy helpful for your practice and the reflection on prayer to be a useful one. If you would like to learn more about us and our community and our school, I would encourage you to reach out to us at dragonflysangha.com, or it's Sangha is Sandha, dragonflysangha.com, or asksensei.tony.com. In addition to learning about us, you can also sign up for mindfulness counseling there as well, if you would like to talk to someone. If you could see yourself entering the seminary and becoming one of the priests in the Order of the Dragonfly, you can sign up there as well. But as always, I hope that you all have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.